Welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today. We're going to unpack a really fascinating progression that completely flips how we normally think about networking, socializing, and, well, just finding our place in the world. As you'll see, true belonging doesn't actually start out there in a crowd. It starts quietly, right there with you.
Okay, let's dive into this. We constantly hear that we need to put ourselves out there if we want to build a network or find a community. But the research we're going over today suggests the exact opposite approach. We're going to see how personal development, specifically mastering your own tiny, authentic daily habits, naturally acts like a magnet to attract deep, meaningful connections. It is very much an inside-out journey.
I actually want to anchor our entire explainer on this incredible quote from a Reddit user, because it just perfectly captures the whole concept. They wrote, "My father always told me, if you want to go for a run, go for a run. Don't look for company. Sooner or later, like-minded people will find you themselves." That right there is the absolute essence of building social capital through individual action. When you honestly work on yourself, people naturally start gravitating toward you.
Let's move to and see how this builds through our roadmap for today. We'll start with 1, the inner drive, 2, mastering tiny habits, 3, the power of authenticity, 4, finding your tribe, and finally, 5, building true communities.
Section 1. The inner drive, finding your motivation. Because all meaningful connection really has to start right at the core of the individual.
To really get a grip on this, we look to self-determination theory, or SDT. This is a massive, highly respected framework in psychology, and it basically tells us that humans aren't just inherently lazy beings that need to be poked and prodded into action. Not at all. We are inherently proactive. We have this completely natural, innate tendency toward growth and making self-motivated choices, especially when we strip away all those external distractions and pressures.
But to actually harness that growth, you've got to look at how you're measuring your success. The Daily Stoic beautifully highlights the difference between using an internal scorecard versus an external one. If you rely on an external scorecard, constantly competing with other people, you fall into what's called a mimetic trap. You're just copying others and playing a game where, honestly, even if you win, you still lose. But if you use an internal scorecard, driven by your own self-satisfaction and your duty to be the best version of yourself, well, there's literally no limit to your performance. So ask yourself, are you competing against the crowd, or are you just competing against your own time?
Right, and according to self-determination theory, that internal drive is fueled by 3 basic, entirely universal psychological needs. First up is autonomy. That's the need to control your own life. Second is competence, the need to actually experience mastery. And third is relatedness, our innate desire to connect with other people. Satisfying these 3 needs is essentially the bedrock of your inner drive and your overall well-being.
Section 2. Mastering tiny habits, building momentum. This is where we look at how that internal motivation translates into the real world.
The psychology of change is super fascinating because our brains are actually hardwired to resist large changes. Big changes trigger a flight response. So to grow, we absolutely must start small. A tiny habit just sneaks right past that resistance. From there, it builds momentum through a nice little feedback loop of small victories. And finally, and really most importantly, it transforms your self-identity. Think about it. If you commit to walking just 5 minutes a day, you stop being someone who wants to exercise, and you literally become someone who is active. That is a massive mental shift.
But let's be real. Keeping those habits going day in and day out requires real psychological skill. And that brings us to mental toughness. In the context of runners and athletes, mental toughness is the skill set that lets you sustainably grind toward a long-term goal, even when you hit inevitable setbacks. It relies on 5 building blocks: focus to set your goals, anxiety management, which is like mastering your own inner pep talks, modulating your intensity, raw mental toughness to stay positive, and confidence that you build through demonstrated success. You control your internal reactions to keep yourself moving forward.
Section 3. The power of authenticity, being true to yourself. It's not enough to just check the boxes on your habits. Those daily actions absolutely must be a true reflection of who you are.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the stark contrast we see in recent psychological research on self-expression. When you engage in authentic expression, meaning your behaviors actually reflect your true self, it directly leads to positive need satisfaction and way greater life satisfaction. But inauthentic expression,
doing things just to fit in or because you feel like you should, actually diminishes your autonomy and significantly increases negative emotions. If your tiny habits are inauthentic, they simply won't lead to true growth.
Section 4. Finding your tribe, connecting with others. This is the moment the narrative moves outward, where the runner finally meets the others out on the trail.
So how exactly does this happen? Well, it happens through a biological and psychological mechanism called shared intentionality. This is our uniquely human capacity to engage with these psychological states of others. It's the literal bridge between your individual action and group belonging. When you're out there authentically pursuing your goals, shared intentionality is what allows you to seamlessly sync up and cooperate with folks who are on that exact same wavelength.
We see this vividly play out in data from Strava regarding runners. Their research notes that participants who view community as a basic need end up participating in races at a very high frequency. Whether the race itself produces the feeling of community or community seekers use races to find each other, the end result is exactly the same. The shared authentic activity of running is fulfilling our fundamental human need to belong.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact of that shared intentionality, which was demonstrated in a super fascinating study out of Connecticut College. They found that when individuals from similar backgrounds engage in organic, aspirational peer mentoring, which basically means simply pursuing their educational goals alongside one another with very minimal outside intervention, they build massive support networks. They naturally generate immense social capital just by authentically pursuing their goals in proximity to one another.
Section 5. Building true communities, forging lasting bonds. So, you've found your tribe. Does the work end there? Not at all. How do we take a group of like-minded individuals and actually forge lasting, meaningful bonds?
The renowned author Scott Peck developed a really interesting model showing that groups actually have to evolve through 4 distinct stages to reach a profound connection. They start at pseudo-community, where everyone is just superficially friendly and avoids all conflict. Then, as differences inevitably pop up, they hit chaos, a period of negativity and frustration. Honestly, most groups fall apart right here. But to move forward, they have to enter the 3rd stage, emptiness. And if they can survive that, they finally reach true community.
Now, emptiness is almost always the hardest step in the entire process. It requires individuals to consciously shed their biases, their need for power and control, and all those classic mechanisms of ego protection. It is quite literally a psychological emptying out of mental distortions so that you can make room for genuine empathy, vulnerability, and true listening. It's essentially a rebirth of the individual within the context of the group.
So, the crucial point is what a true community actually looks like once individuals successfully integrate their habits, their authenticity, and navigate through that difficult stage of emptiness. It's characterized by deep inclusivity and realism. It's a genuinely safe place for vulnerability. Members are completely capable of fighting gracefully, meaning they resolve conflicts with wisdom and respect rather than just tearing each other down. And it operates as a group of all leaders, guided by the spirit of the community itself rather than relying on a single dictator.
And that brings us to the end of our journey today, leaving us with this one big question to reflect on. Are your daily habits building a true community or just a pseudo-community? Remember, the path to finding your people doesn't start by changing who you are just to fit into a crowd. It starts by looking at your own internal scorecard, cultivating your own authentic tiny habits, and trusting that as you run your own race, like-minded people will absolutely find you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this empowers you to take that next small step today.